Live from the studio at the Northwest Florida School of Biblical Studies, this is Have a Bible Question, where you are part of the program. Now, let's go to the Bible for answers to your Bible questions.
The next question we have, Troy, I'm going to toss it right to you. Just go ahead.
Okay, so this question comes in, and it is specifically about a verse. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 4.
Well, that's good. Bible answer before Bible questions.
And that's exactly right. It says in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 4, you have not yet resisted to bloodshed, striving against sin. And the question is does this mean that they have not suffered as in other Christians? Because we know, for example, in the book of Acts, they did suffer up to death. Have these people here that are being written to, have they not suffered things like death and been persecuted? Have they not died? You know, this is about some 30 years later, approximately after the book of Acts was written, whenever they were being persecuted to death. And so what's going on here? Or were they discouraged that they weren't willing to put their life on the line to stand up for Jesus? Or what's going on? Why? What does this mean? What is this verse talking about?
You know, it gets confusing when you look at that little phrase, resisted unto blood, because when you first look at that, it's like, well, what's that mean? But the context really identifies and lets us know that. And so I want to back up and read just a little bit. Chapter 12, beginning in verse 1. Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which does so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. I love that cloud of witnesses, because remember, this was right after Hebrews 11, that he was going through all these people that had done these great things and faith. That cloud of witnesses is actually a reference back to chapter 11.
That's right.
All right, so verse 2, looking unto Jesus. So run the pace, learn from them, but look unto Jesus. So we're running this race, and what are we looking at?
Keeping our eyes on Jesus.
Ray preached a sermon a while back that he was talking about his daddy teaching him to drive, and how he was told, don't look at the road directly in front of you. You got to look out in front of you. Riding a motorcycle. Just got me a new to me motorcycle. And one of the things you learn when you ride a motorcycle is you look where you want to go. And that means don't look at the bottom, don't look down at the road. You're going to fall if you do. Look out in front of you. It's kind of like bicycles, right? You ride a bike. So he's saying, you run that race, and looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross.
A cross being joyful.
Yeah.
That's an oxymoron, by the way. Like jumbo shrimp.
Well, I mean, he knew the slow asphyxiation that he was going to endure.
Yes, he knew the pain. He knew all the suffering that was going to be involved in that. But he also knew why.
And that's where the joy came.
Yeah.
For the joy. And I think about that, the joy of childbirth.
No woman that I know has said it was fun, but afterwards.
Yeah. And Jesus, knowing what was to come, could speak of it in that way. So he says, who for the joy that was set before him endured. And I love that word endured, because it's really conveys a little bit more the idea that it wasn't pleasant. It was something he had to go through. He endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him that endured such contradiction of sinners against himself, lest ye be wearied and faint in your minds. And there's where there's this switch about, all right, you're running this race. Don't get weary and begin to faint. You keep looking to Jesus and what he did. Verse 4, you have not resisted unto blood, striving against sin. And ye have forgotten the exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children. My son, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him. For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son of whom he receiveth. I think, and if you go on verse 7, the Bible I'm actually using talks about the idea, and it gives a heading that says endure chastening, because verse 7, if you endure chastening, he's saying, look, you're going to go through some hardships. I think he's preparing them. And this verse is saying, remember, you haven't faced anything compared to what Jesus faced. And that's what that verse 7 You haven't had the resisting to blood is talking about the sacrifice that Jesus made, and you haven't done that. Now, there were Christians dying during this time.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. And also you got to remember the context of the book itself. It's called the book of Hebrews. Mm-hmm. It's a letter written to the Hebrews. And so this writer is writing to some Jewish Christians, these Christians who came out of the Jewish faith, became Christ followers.
Yeah, by birth they were still Jews. But
yes.
By faith they are Christians.
They might have even been practicing Jews, and they came out of that religion into Christianity. Mm-hmm. And many of them are wanting to go back to the law of Moses. And we know that because we infer, because all through the book it says this is a better covenant, a better high priest, a better system. And so he's trying to convince them, don't go back. So as you were saying, that keep your eyes on Jesus. You're doing right. You got to keep your eyes on Jesus. And it helps me a lot of times to look at other look at other versions of the same verse. When you look at that verse 4, there's different versions. Like the ESV says, in your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. The Good News Bible, which I don't recommend, but sometimes it helps. It says, for in your struggle against sin, you have not yet had to resist to the point of being killed. And so what he's saying is, look, you need to keep your eyes on Jesus, who suffered and died for you, and you don't have it bad right now. You're not, this makes me think about us right now in America.
Oh, yeah.
How many of us are really experiencing persecution? How many Americans are being killed for their faith? We haven't. I think this could apply to us. He could be writing to the Americans. Right. You have not yet resisted. You Americans have not yet resisted to bloodshed, striving against sin. In other words, listen, you need to maintain your faith, and it's going to be tested. And then you get into verse 7 that you were heading to just a minute ago.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's all about the endurance. I love that. Go ahead, Ray.
I wasn't expecting you to come to me so fast.
I saw you in the corner of my eye there, brother.
You did. You picked me up quick. Man, I forgot what I was going to say now. No. We're talking about comparing them to Jesus, right? And even the ones he's talking to obviously haven't died because he's talking to them. If they were dead, he wouldn't be able to talk to them. Mm-hmm. But even though some people will say Christians did die during that time, yes, but every Christian that died during that time, we've all sinned, right? Romans 3:23, we've all sinned and come short of the glory of God.
Oh, good point.
Jesus died without being sinful. He died a sinless life. He was perfect. Mm-hmm. He died innocent. So even if we do have to come to our death, we still can't understand what Jesus went through because we're worthy of death for the sins that we have committed. Does that make sense?
That sounds like a Jeff Orr answer there.
That's a great. Bringing out the big guns right there.
He said the contradiction of sinners against himself. So he's talking about Jesus was punished because of what sinners did to him, and like he said, we are sinners and we're experiencing things. God is allowing it to happen. That's the chastisement, but it is to make us stronger and more spiritual. Like.
Trying of our faith, worketh patience.
In James chapter 1, that's right. That all ties together. But then he says that, if verse 8, and we didn't get that far, but if ye be without chastisement, in other words, if you're living a life that's where you're living for Christ, but you're not receiving any type of blowback, wherefore are all partakers, then are ye, well, he uses the term bastards, which has to do not truly the son of God.
Not truly a son of God, right.
Illegitimate and not sons, indicating that, they're not resisting against evil, and therefore they are not being punished by it.
That's a great passage to connect with 2 Timothy 3:12. Yea, and all that will live godly shall suffer persecution.
That's right.
I also think it connects with 2 Corinthians 13, verse 5, which tells us that we are to examine ourselves to make sure that we are in the faith. It says, examine yourselves as to whether you are in the faith. Prove yourselves. Do you not know yourselves that Jesus Christ is in you, unless indeed you are disqualified? Mm-hmm. And so, they need to understand that they're going to be, listen, I think this is a great way of looking at and saying, if everything is going perfect in your life and everything, and you don't have any problems at all with anybody or anything,
you're probably not doing something
you
right.
might not be doing something right. You might need to check your faith, because if you're living
You
your
better
life,
check yourself.
if you're living your life according to the scriptures, you're going to get pushback. You're going to receive some kind of, what are we looking for? Just, it could be from persecution
or resistance.
Yeah. Something.
Yeah.
I go off topic just a second though. If you're watching the program, if you're doing that while you're washing the dishes or something like that, that's great. But I want to encourage you, always go back later if you need to, because you're listening to it driving down the road through the podcast or something. But this makes about 3 or 4 verses that I have written down in my Bible tonight as cross references. Just adding, because it's like, oh yeah, that would be good for me to have later. So right there next to verse 8, I wrote 2 Timothy 3:12, 2 Corinthians 13:5. Get you a wide margin Bible. Get you a pen out, and because these guys that are in this room, they help us to they help me in my Bible study. I said, I've never connected that verse right there, but that fits.
That's one of the reasons I love this program, because exactly what you just said right there.